Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. Right, so Celine, lovely to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you, Guy. I'm excited.
I am as well. I've been looking forward to this. So obviously, I start every podcast off the same way, every episode. I know who you are. The audience doesn't. So Celine, just introduce yourself to us.
Thank you, Guy. I'm an author, an activist, and a consultant in the field of leadership.
That sounds like a pretty good spectrum. So we'll get into that and find out what all that means. And you tell me where you're based, where you're living, and where you're working from.
So I've been based in many places in the world, but currently I'm based in Lyon, France.
And we were just talking about the fantastic restaurants that exist in Lyon.
It's awesome. I think I put on 5 kilos the first 2 months I lived there.
I'm not surprised. Do you know what I remember about Lyon was the automated underground where there's no drivers.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. There's a line like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember going on it and suddenly realising I was at the front and there was nobody driving. I was like, hold on a minute. It was so brilliant. I do remember that. And eating myself stupid for a few weeks as well. But there we go. So, Celine, give us, before we get into, so you have a book called Dare to Unlead, and we're going to talk about that in more depth, but I'm a firm believer that understanding who the person is gives more credibility to maybe their voice and what it is that they have to offer. So just bring to life, how did Celine get to today?
And that's a great question, Guy, because the book is more than a book. I would say it's a story of a corporate journey, a long corporate journey, and even more than that, because I introduced the book with the story of my grandmother, who used to be a factory worker in a very, very poor region in the north of France. She started work at 9 years old. It was forbidden at that time already to have so young kids work in factories. Nevertheless, it was done, and her family was extended and very big and very poor, and so that was the only way they could do. So she worked in this lace factory, and she told me when I was younger, when she was still alive, that she used to be hidden in the washrooms when the labor inspector came to the factory. So she and the other children used to be, removed, kept away during the inspection visits, and went back to work afterwards. And it's such a compelling story for me to realize that these times are gone. We have moved from time where child labor was permitted, was normal, to it becoming less normal, to it becoming completely forbidden. We have evolved as a society, and I feel our corporate world is today in another need of evolution. And how did I come to that? I was born in France, in the southwest of France. I studied politics and corporate communications, and I joined the corporate world aged 21. Had a number of positions, mostly in business operations and mostly in Asia. The first 10 years of my professional lives were spent mostly in Asia. I went to Vietnam to look for a job. I spent 4 beautiful years there. I made friends for life. I learned to speak the language, and it was an amazing experience of human diversity, but also of human connection. And I went to China as well. I worked in the media field in China. I was a sales rep over Southeast Asia for a tech company. So overall, the first 10 years of deep of exploration of in an entrepreneurial mindset where things moved fast, where everything seemed possible. It was a high pace development in those countries at that time. And then I returned to Europe. That was around 2001, and joined a large pharma company. And I stayed 17 years in this large pharma company, during a number of having a number of different roles, mostly business operations, a little bit of HR, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of project management, those kind of things. But a big organization, and it was my first experience there. I learned a lot. I've been extremely happy and extremely unhappy too, because I think progressively, after the thrill of newness, of exploration, of discovery, etc., I started to progressively feel the weight of corporate conservatism, on me, and I could see it on other people. I could see this conservatism, this culture shaping behaviors, shaping and really limiting the talent, or the use of existing talent in the company. I could see those very strong systemic forces, restricting the potential, the collective potential I could see here. And at first, I took it for me. I thought, oh, maybe I'm not, I don't know, adapted or not good enough for this company, because I don't have a scientific background, so maybe I should, learn. But then I realized, again, it was very progressive. But then I realized that this limitation of opportunities did not just apply to me; it applied to other people as well. Interestingly, all the most often the most creative ones, the most interesting ones, the most unusual kind of talents were the ones who did not make um, the who did not climb the ladder in that organization. And I wondered why, and then I realized that there was a certain a very narrow type of person only that was permitted to rise through the ranks and to basically join the decision making circles. And so I mean, it was annoying, and I could have left the company. Maybe I was not, courageous enough to do it at the time. But then I thought, it's a loss for me. It's a loss for those people whose different and interesting voices are not heard. But it's a loss for the company as a whole as well, because I felt that in our times of change, what customers require more and more is a company, is, how can I say, to be understood, to be served in their own unique needs, in their own unique personality traits and expectations and history. So it's a connection. The need for connection is becoming even more and more important now. You may have the most beautiful, perfect, whatever product or service. If you're not connected, if you're not able to understand deeply your customer base or your ecosystem, you won't get very far. And we had only a tiny fraction of the human population types represented in our decision-making bodies. And I thought these people are great, but they cannot understand this whole diversity we're supposed to serve. More and more of our clients were located in developing countries, in Asia, in India. Many of those customers were women, and there were barely any women in the top of the company. So at some point in 2010, I sent a letter to the CEO of the company. Bear with me, it was not a company, not a kind of corporate culture where people freely write to their CEOs and expect an answer. But I did that nevertheless. And this letter, because I forwarded it to 3 friends of mine, became viral and marked the beginning of a movement in the company, a completely grassroots movement, people joining forces to not to protest, but in a very interesting move that would then shape the whole rest of my career until now. Would contribute. People would get together to help the company, to help the organization become better, more modern, more open, adapt to change. So they would be the change instead of expecting the change to come by magic from somebody else, from the CEO or from HR or you name it. And seeing this energy, so this little thing that was triggered by this letter became a community of about 3,000 people across 50 countries, um, growing beyond the boundaries of the company. And it's now more than 10 years later, it has become an organization that is now an official advisor to the French ministries for regulations, whatever. It's a think tank. It's a network of networks. So it's been very powerful and successful. But my own aha moment from what happened was the energy, the value creation potential that was lying here in people getting together freely because they wanted, because they were they had this thing in common that resonated with their values, this desire to contribute to something bigger than themselves. And I thought I need to leverage that. I need to show there's business value here. It means business. This engagement. It's now you can call it community engagement, or community engagement is probably the best wording for that. And for me, it was a discovery. 2010-11, leveraging the social networks. So that was also my beginning in using social networks internally, externally. And I felt I needed to make a proof of concept in a way. And I found a department in the company that was supporting the launch of a new product. A product was about to be launched, and there was budget around that. So I suggested we develop a community engagement approach to complement this very traditional marketing approach that was being designed. It was we were about to basically push messages, marketing messages at audiences, at targets. That's what we do usually, especially in highly regulated organizations where everything needs to be under control, etc. So we were about to push that. Advertising, PR, the traditional stuff. And instead, or in complement to that, I did a large community engagement project, leveraging social media, leveraging community, etc. And this thing proved enormously successful externally because the community gathered in 9 months 250,000 people worldwide. It had never been seen in the whole pharma industry. It got a number of awards, and it was highly. It was shown as an example by the WHO as an e-health initiative, as a model e-health initiative. So something really, really, really interesting. However, very difficult for me internally because it challenged a lot of assumptions and cultural norms, about control, about, certainty, risk avoidance. What happens when we open up to a community, when we engage a community instead of, pushing messages at targets? Well, results are less certain. Huh? But then that's where you need to learn. That's what makes you learn agility. What we call agility now. There's agile organizations everywhere, but often I feel agile has become a template, and I don't think agile can ever be a template. It's a mindset. It's a set of behaviors, and that's what organizations learn by doing community engagement. So anyway, we're here in 2000. So this proof of concept, this large, community engagement activity was in 2012 and 13. Okay, so still quite early, I would say, and the use of social media at scale by the pharma industry. And this attracted the attention of the new chief quality officer who joined the organization at that time, 2014, and who felt there was potential in this kind of approach to improve the way people worked internally in our organization, especially in manufacturing operations. We had 10,000 people worldwide working in our factories, manufacturing vaccines. It's a very complicated product to manufacture. And there were a lot of issues with quality. And it's not because we were, idle or incompetent or, badly equipped. There was a lot of effort and a lot of money invested on all that. But people were working in isolation, in silos. There was a fear culture, definitely. People were a fear and blame culture, a risk avoidance culture, extremely high. So basically, no innovation could really take place. It was highly bureaucratic, and but great people, lots of great people. So there was potential. Again, I feel potential is always here. And so I was approached to help quality. We created a position called innovation and engagement. So I was head of innovation and engagement for quality. I moved to Boston for that position, stayed 4 years there, and worked with Dr. John Kotter in particular, the author of 8 Steps of Leading Change and The Heart of Change and other books, Accelerate. And we really aimed at we triggered a movement. We built almost like a political movement, but in the company, leveraging this desire of people to contribute to something bigger than themselves. And I sometimes described my job at that time as when people ask, what do you do? I said, I aim to shift quality from an imposed constraint on people to a shared passion. So it was this activist mindset that I tried to awaken, and all what I learned before, and what I learned through Qatar around community mobilization, volunteer networks, the dual operating system that Qatar talks about, and so forth. And I also learned enormously from living organizations, in particular from Myron Rogers, who wrote the foreword of my book, and who's been thinking and living in that field for many, many years, many decades. So it's about approaching change as in an ecosystem. And all this came to, so I closed this period, this 17 years in the pharma industry 4 years ago. I returned to France, set up my own consulting business then, and felt that it would be maybe interesting even for me first to put all those experiences together, plus the additional ones I got as a consultant, and try to understand really why what I saw worked. So it's the book started with an exploration. As an exploration project, really. I wanted to understand, and now it's just been published. So you see, the story is a story of progressively realizing that systemic forces are at play, but that we can do something about them together.
There's a lot going on there, Celine. That's quite a story. Just listening to that, I hear quite a lot of things going on, and I think, you've described almost, and of course it's always simpler to say it than it is to live it, but the dream of people to make a difference in their own organization is for many something that they aspire to, but they don't know how to do it. They don't feel that, if I was an external consultant and I was being brought in to do it, of course, I'd have leverage and the expectation to do so. But within my own organization, where I may not have the positional power or the personal influence. So it's very interesting that you're telling a story where something like that activated.
Yeah. And I did...
and took off.
And I did a number of mistakes as well, of course, which I learned from, hopefully. For example, one of those mistakes was how can I say? I still love provocation, but I try to use it wisely now. Because I realized that provocation is a way to make yourself happy, but it creates resistance. So it doesn't bring a lot of solution. If my original idea was to change the system. Let's change it. Let's replace all those old conservative, know nothing about social world old guys. Let's replace them by young people, diverse, open to the world, etc., and things will be better. But it never works this way. You cannot replace a domination by another one. We need to work together. We need even those kind of guys I wanted to replace. Well, we need them as well, right?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because the phrase, and I don't know if it translates to outside of England, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is a phrase that we have here, which is, there can be a great desire to do a clean sweep, but the reality is whoever is in senior roles, as long as their behavior isn't fundamentally toxic, there is vast amounts of experience, there is a lot of knowledge, there is a lot of insight. Now, it may have become habitualized, it may have become fearful, it may have become isolated, but there is that balance against the new with the innovation, the energy, but also maybe a lack of wisdom, a lack of foresight, and when those two things can come together and they combine, then, you have the older guard being catalyzed, the younger guard being guided, and then you get these lovely balances. So I just wonder, for you, when you look at change in that way, I love that phrase, provocation, creates resistance, but it feels slower, perhaps.
Yes.
It feels as if it's going to take so much longer.
You're right. And we still need to be wary of this this combination between the old and the new, in ways that it happens, because it can happen in the form of mediocre consensus. And mediocre consensus pleases I would say the old. It sort of, and it may appease the new, but it produces nothing of value. It's just a way to, when we see that the huge problems in front of us, global warming and those kind of, we cannot continue to approach them in mediocre consensus way. We need innovation. We need bold and innovative ways, and so that's where I find that paying attention to building coalitions. How do you build but activist coalitions? Coalitions with a purpose, with an intention, and relying on everyone's sense of purpose. And I think, except the very tiny minority, a very little fraction of toxic people who just want evil, and I don't even know whether apart Putin who would fit in that category. I think there's this human desire to contribute to something better. And the trick is to find ways to build those and I wouldn't even use the word build, but trigger, support, nurture coalitions, constructive coalitions that will enable progress. And I love to quote Mary Parker Follett here, who was an early management thinker. She lived about 100 years ago, and she wrote amazing things about community, among other things. And about community, she said that community is a process. And even she was even more sharper than that. She said community is an integration process. So an integration between different point of views, to build not consensus, not and obviously not to defeat a point of view against another, but integration. That is the creative, the development of creative solutions that integrate all point of views, or a lot of those. And that's what I'm aiming for in community engagement. It's this process of creative integration.
So I want to pick up on a couple of things here. One is, I think you said activist coalitions.
Yeah.
And this word activist is quite interesting, because the phrase working party, or we're going to create a team, or whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with that. We understand what that means. But the word active is one thing. The word activist is another, where in my mind, and of course add, reinforce and challenge what I'm about to say, but that word activist means it's interesting, you wouldn't form a team without intent to do something, but then again many teams seem to go nowhere. So a group of activists, there's a passion, there's a drive,
exactly,
there's maybe even a state of unreasonableness, but with the intent that it brings change rather than it does nothing. Have I understood that correctly, Celine?
Very correctly. And there's a fine line between being an activist and being a complete idealist, or even what would be the word? In this book, for example, I make a parallel at some point between activists and terrorists. Terrorists are so motivated by their cause that they, pay no attention to the harm their cause creates to others. And in regard to that, I bring the word of Paul Landsberg, who used to be a resistant in France during Second World War, and who said we need to be activists, with our full selves, and completely committed to our cause, and yet remember constantly the limitations of our cause. So we need to be modest or self-aware, and at the same time being fully engaged in the cause we support. And it's a cause where it's a cause that should unite rather than divide, and that's really, I think, possibly the key of success of those activist movements in the workplace. How do we shape and word causes that unite rather than divide, but yet that remain meaningful? I give you an example. This whole journey into corporate activism started with diversity. You can have gender diversity in the workplace, and you can have an approach to diversity that divides, that creates more resistance, that antagonizes where some people feel left out and feel that diversity is a self-promoting work, is a self-serving work, and it's what about me? What am I going to lose, etc. And there's another way, and quite often, before I move to the other way, organizations have unwillingly, obviously, of course, but have unwillingly developed approaches to diversity that fall into that trap. Training, diversity courses, diversity department, diversity, checklists, etc., where people feel obliged, compelled, constrained, and yes, antagonized for some of them. And there's another way, which is a way that unites, that favors co-construction within the workplace in a way that brings diversity to life. For example, in the last in basically every project I support with clients, I invite clients to form volunteer teams. And volunteer teams are very different from appointed teams, where you appoint people, you identify people, you call them change agents, but they are people that you, as a more senior person, have identified. It doesn't work the same way as enabling volunteer teams. So volunteers are, in the best option, are selected upon anonymized applications and are selected, in addition to the quality of people's application, on demographic data to make sure you have the broadest diversity in a single team. Gender, tenure, hierarchical levels, you name it, function, etc., etc. That's how you get a diversity of viewpoints in action. Very often, organizations think of identity diversity, like men and women, or functional diversity. Let's put marketing and R&D together, but they very, very seldom think of social diversity, for example, diploma, education background diversity. And it's by mixing hierarchical levels in volunteer teams or volunteer networks, by having people get to know each other through common action, that you create this agility, this openness to diversity.
I'm super aware here that this is a topic that, and I think I've said this on every single episode of this podcast, that the right bottle of wine and food, I could talk about these topics for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm not hesitating because I don't know what to say. I'm hesitating because I realize how much I want to talk about it. So activism is an interesting thing at the moment, where we see activism particularly in US companies, where activism, and I think all things have a tendency to have a group of people that take something that has value and they let the pendulum swing so far into the dark side in some respects that it spoils the meaning of what it is for everybody else.
Correct.
Because we have activists in the UK at the moment who are gluing themselves to the roads and to petrol stations and to this, that, and the other, because they are eco warriors for, the world. Now, in essence, the argument, I'm not going to get into whether it's right or wrong. That's almost not the point. The point is there's a level of activism that borders then on terrorism, which then turns people off to the reality of a very good message.
Exactly.
And so I imagine that phrase activism, when you offer it into organizations, I wonder how that phrase is something that I know what you mean, you know what you mean, and if I took 5 minutes to listen to what you mean, I'm with you.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that word has an effect that has value that you didn't put onto it, but others, activism, oh god, that's the last thing we need.
Yes.
I wonder if that happens.
I'm totally with you. And in addition, there are other understandings of the word activism. For example, when you can have activist corporations, corporations taking a stance on social issues or environmental issues or whatever. Very often, these are communication elements. And they're not integrated in how the organization works. You can have also employee activism sometimes against their organization, for whatever, gay rights or whatever. What I suggest is a corporate policy. It's not even a policy, it's a corporate behavior, it's a way of working that integrates this passion, this momentum that you can find in activism. So it's really importing the tools and techniques of social activism in the service of business-related topics, as I have shown it was possible to do. But I'm aware that the word, so activism is about action. It's about developing human agency at all levels in the organization, and that's how organizations get active, really wake up almost. People from, not that they were asleep, but they were constrained by bureaucracy, hierarchy, and so forth. So it's creating more leadership at more levels of the organization in a way, but sometimes in order not to create or trigger resistance with this wording, corporate activism, I use other words like engagement leadership or community engagement in the workplace, or there's many other ways, human agency and so forth. But nevertheless, I still believe in the value of those activist so showing where this thing comes from. It's not these are new patterns of connection, of relationship between people and their work, right? So it's and there's a lot of studies around that, and I think we should, rather than be afraid and say, "Ooh, what is it? This is going to be chaos, etc." Let's stay curious. That's what I advocate for: curiosity.
Okay. So a couple of things then. The book title is Dare to Unlead. So just that dare to unlead, rather than me tell you what I think it means, what did you mean when you said that?
So you will not, you do not ignore the reference to a super famous book by Brené Brown called Dare to Lead. And Brené Brown has done fabulous work in the field of self-development. And so my title is absolutely not a criticism on, I would say it's a nod, it's a gentle nod. And it carries the idea that this focus we're putting on individual leadership, the qualities of a leader, what a leader should be, what a leader should not be, etc., is sort of transforming the leader into almost like a mythical, heroic, a completely extraordinary kind of person. The leader needs to be so perfect. The leader is a saint. There are very few saints in real life, and so leadership is for an exclusive few, sort of. And I loathe this idea. I hate it. I think it's completely toxic. It's doing us a big disservice, but we are all complicit in it, in a way, because it's easy. You have a leader, you vote for someone, or you appoint someone at the head of an organization, and if that someone makes mistakes, or you can blame that person, and say, not my fault. Not my fault. I'm there for, nothing here is because of me. I think as we continue approaching big deadlines related to, again, global warming or those sorts of huge problems, we cannot hand over our responsibilities, our agency, our creativity to a few people, to just a few people only. We need to be together involved and engaged into co-creating solutions, because people own what they help create, and as long as they relinquish their agency, they will be dissatisfied, and solutions will not be adequate. They will not reflect our diversity. And that's where you get a society that is more and more divided and angry, and where people dehumanize the other almost. And it's sad and tragic. So instead, I suggest we consider we step down from the leadership golden pedestal, and consider the bravery of leading together, of considering leadership as a collective capacity, as a collective ability, rather than an individual skill set. So that's what I invite people to do with this book.
And you speak about liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Yeah. So I was, in the beginning, I told you this started as a research project, and I felt the need to structure my ideas without falling in the trap of creating a new framework. I think we die under frameworks right now. We're overloaded, overwhelmed with frameworks. Frameworks are, they are extremely reductionist ways to approach reality. Some of them can be helpful, of course, but they need to be taken with a grain of salt. And I didn't want to feed the framework machine with my own stuff. So instead, I looked for ways to structure my thoughts with values, universal values, nothing that can be copyrighted. That's on purpose. And I played with this idea in the beginning. I thought, could I talk about leadership and unleadership in particular along those values? They are, of course, culturally related to me, but I think they're more universal than French, really. And the more I thought about it, the more they resonated. So liberty is about, so I first question whether liberty is possible in the workplace, whether equality is possible in the workplace, fraternity. Nothing of that is easy. Nothing, you can't take, you can say, you cannot answer a simple, oh yeah, of course. No, liberty is, freedom is dangerous in a way, in the workplace, However, I think any work related to change, to collective leadership, to impacts, starts by freeing oneself from those systemic forces that shape our behaviors in the workplace. And freeing ourselves from them starts by seeing them. If we don't see systems, we remain chained and constricted and limited. So, and Barry Oshry said, seeing system sight as opposed to system blindness is the source of empowerment. And that's what happened to me when I realized the systemic forces against diversity in the very first place 12 years ago. It's by shifting my perspective from an individual, me-centered vision to a systemic vision. And that's where I thought, oh, okay, maybe I can do something about that or contribute. And even if it's small, you never know. At least I will have done something. And that little something, that little letter, and the movements that followed indeed changed my life and changed many other people's lives as well. So liberty starts with oneself. I think we cannot you cannot liberate people. I think that's what Paulo Freire said several decades ago. You cannot liberate people as objects. People need to liberate themselves, right? So it's creating an invitation for people to see systems and to change patterns of relationships. That's for liberty, and I speak in this chapter about the dangers, the joys and the dangers of being a change agent, and how you can be a more how can I say, successful change agent. Because sometimes I find change agents hurt themselves without even knowing. They do not serve their own cause. And I'd love to help with some of the things I've learned throughout the way. So that's for liberty. Do you want me to speak about the other two?
Well, just bring them to life. Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
I mean, people can buy the book if they want to find out more, right? But just give it. just give that synopsis and just so we got a sense of it.
Yeah, of course. So, there's no particular order between. Again, it's not a stepwise or a thing or a framework. But I think a self-reflection is anyway critical in any work of change. Equality is about removing domination and submission from the system. Domination and submission patterns are extremely toxic. They limit our organization's capacity for change, and they need to be limited as much as possible. And for this, I believe that a huge opportunity lies in networks as organizing principle, but also as technologies. So this part is a lot about connecting those people. I talked about this diversity, bringing more diversity in the system, connecting the system to more of itself so that it evolves its own identity. It sees itself with more complexity, which makes the network better able to respond to the diversity of the external world, to the newness that comes at itself. So that's the part around equality. And then how do you keep the network together? How do you make sure it doesn't, grow into any direction? Well, here, that's where I bring fraternity or community, or the word is also a little bit tainted now, but this sense of togetherness, of willful togetherness in the workplace. And here I believe it stems from joint action in the service of a shared cause. So that's where we bring in the activist mindset. This activist mindset creates extremely strong bonds between people, because they all believe and support a common cause, right? So whatever our differences, our political differences, or our whatever, gender identity differences, we're all activists for something we have in common. And that is what creates this togetherness that is missing in society today. So I believe the workplace can be the place where we spend 8 hours a day there, It can be the place where we restore the quality of human bonds. And I'm not idealistic here. I've seen it. I've seen it in action. I've seen it for real many times. Every time I deploy this approach with clients, and every time I did it myself, it worked. It's crazy. Why don't we do that more often? Well, it takes a certain kind of leadership, and that's quite frankly the main obstacle. I think leaders in senior positions especially, but not only there, are groomed to behave in a certain way, to expect certainty, control, to be more knowledgeable than the teams they lead. All those habits that used to be completely relevant in the past, but that have become irrelevant now. Like child labor I talked about in the beginning. When it became completely irrelevant, it was removed. And so in Western countries, at least, or developed countries. So I think we need to do that as well with leadership. And it's not a revolution. Let's not add stress and fear. It's an evolution, but it's a natural evolution that meets people's expectations. The young generations will, in particular, will not accept the leader type of leadership we ourselves were accustomed to when we started our career. It just doesn't work anymore with people. And this type of leadership I described, this collective leadership, which it creates collective capacity, it is also the one that produces great business benefits. And here again, I've seen that. I have all sorts of business cases. So it works better. It works better for business. It works better for people. Why don't we do it more?
Amen.
In fact,
so listen,
I have an answer. The answer is power. It's the intoxication of power and the privileges that go with power. It's hard to resist. Huh?
I also believe there's a fear. We've got those. I think I've come to believe that there is a lot of historic models that people sometimes shy away from because they're excited by the new stuff. But the reality for me is, if you look at something like Maslow, and just at the bottom of that pyramid, people fear loss of just finance, loss of just that fear about, the market made me, how would I get another job, and how would I keep up the standard of living I've got? And then you get to my personal validity and how I see myself as a leader. And as you say, I've imprinted on this is what good looks like. So it does become intoxicating. And at the same time, I think if you think about push and pull, or what I'm moving towards, I might be moving towards, it is intoxicating. It does feed my ego, but I'm also fearful. I'm also stepping away from losing a sense of position, of control, of financial income, so this duality exists. And I've come to a conclusion that more often than not, it's the fear of loss that drives, and maybe but that's so beautifully counterbalanced by why what do I fear? I fear the loss of control, the loss of ego, the loss of pride, the loss of money, the loss of. So these two things are two sides of the same coin. They're there. So I do acknowledge that, and I really agree with that completely. Yes,
you're correct. And yet there's so much to gain, so much more to gain from collective leadership.
It is, and I think, again, as we on this topic, it is fascinating that if all things are equal, when you're on a high performing team, the idea of making subtle shifts and shifting a mental frame of reference to then enable greater things, that seems very doable. But for a lot of people, they look at their span of control, they look at the resources that they perceive that they have, and they don't see the competence in the moment. And therefore, idealistically, they go, if everybody was half as good as I'd like them to be, I'm all up for this. The reality is, I look down, and for whatever reasons, because we didn't coach people properly, we didn't give people feedback, or the talent market is very scarce at the moment, or blah, 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 whatever it might be, intellectually, I agree with you, but actually I don't see, or I see the bridge of getting to where that you might be talking about in some people's minds is I'm too fearful of that gap in between with my workload and what I've got to achieve by the end of the month and next month that I don't want to make it harder for myself right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I see that a lot.
And I totally get it. But precisely what I'm suggesting is not to shift overnight from, I'm the leader and I tell my team what to do to let them do whatever they want. It's absolutely not that. But it's about building, taking the time to nurture the social capital of your organization, of your team, to build relationships, to create opportunities to more different people to work on different things, to improve, to increase the level of freedom in the system. And frankly, people who do that are surprised. They had no idea of the talent that was available. They were, crying for talent at the beginning of the project or before the project starts, and they say, "Oh, we cannot find good leaders, blah blah blah. It's so difficult." And then at the end, they're like blown away by the talent and creativity of their people. And I'm like, it was there. It was already there, but you didn't create the conditions for this talent to flourish. And that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah. Have you ever read the Richard Semler book, Maverick?
Yes, I have. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And does that fit into, different vocabulary because he's telling us a narrative rather than sort of educating, but does that fit into your thinking about the way he kind of freed that very parental, dominant, hierarchical family business that he took over in Brazil, or I think it was Brazil, and how he turned it into very much a kind of a flat-based structure where people even decided their own salaries and that kind of stuff. Does that come into your thinking?
Yes, it's certainly related, and my book is inspired by so many readings. You'll see that. But there's more to. I find that a lot of. But this book is great. But I find that a lot of what happens in the field of organizational change takes place around structure change. Now, how should we get organized? And I find this is a very limiting question. This is not even the main question. I don't think it is. The idea, you can keep your organization as it is. You don't need to evolve, to radically change or to evolve to whatever pod structure, or you don't need that. It's you need to first invest in quality relationships, in creating those opportunities for connection between people, creating low risk, low visibility opportunities first, maybe, and then, but not as a sponsor, not standing above, other people and letting them experience. It's by coming down from your pedestal, rolling up your sleeves and working with people and asking the question to solve together. What do we want to do together? And too often leaders have they have too much impatience about the result of their own. They want to see their own ideas in action right now, but then it's too fast. It does not create ownership or authorship with people, and ultimately you don't get great results because people are hardly engaged because they have not been able to create it, and sometimes those ideas are not even good because they come from a single point of view only, and that's why we need much more diversity in co-creation in the system.
Okay, love it. Okay, so listen, I hate doing this, but I'm going to bring us to a close just because I've got about 98 other questions and topics that I'd like to really get into with you. So just being alert to the fact that this people will have the sort of capacity for listening. So listen, where do people reach out to you, Celine? I will put it in the details around the episode, but just if people are listening, where do they reach out?
Two main places, I would say: my website, weneedsocial.com, and my YouTube channel, Celine Schillinger. But of course, much more is available in the book, Dare to Unlead, The Art of Relational Leadership in a Fragmented World. And you told me about one of your former guests, Amy Edmondson. And Amy Edmondson actually wrote endorsement for the book. She says it's sweeping and intelligent. And a lot of nice things about the book. You'll see that.
Well, listen, this is fantastic. weneedsocial.com, Celine Schillinger for the YouTube. The book is Dare to Unlead. And Celine, you have been an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Guy.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness, and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.